Surprise, Simply Trade listeners. Every Sunday, we're going to spice things up with a shot of adrenaline pumping news. We know you come to Simply Trade for top-notch education and insider knowledge straight from trade professionals, but let's face it, the world never stops spinning and things happen every week that affect our daily lives. So we're bringing you the biggest stories in the trade world, served up fresh and hot with a side of entertainment from your favorite hosts, Andy and Lalo. I'm Anik, and I'll be moderating this news show. So let's get it all started. Hi, trade professionals. We are back with another episode of the News Roundup. Today we have here with me Lalo and Andy. Great to have you guys, or great to have me because I'm the visitor and I'm also the moderator. My name's Anik. So let's get into the three articles. They're fun today. I thought they're too similar, but we had already kind of a conversation and they're not. So I'm glad they don't think so because to me it all kind of sounds the same. But let's make it sound better. So that's why we have Lalo and Andy, right? Okay. The first article is the U.S. government warns trade finance lenders over breaches of Russia export controls. Okay, I kind of know what's going on. I'm kind of aware. I think everyone is now with all the news happening. So I just wanted to touch base on these news as this is something all companies have to be aware of and can fear because I know sanctions are a big thing. And if you go against them, you'll be fined a lot. So my question is, okay, so what if they're exporting to a country and that country then exports it to Russia? Are they still the ones who are going to be fined, or what's happening and what even is happening right now regards of it all? Like, let's go into detail of that and answer those kind of questions. So let's hit it off.
Well, Lalo, you want to hit that first or you want me to?
Yeah, well, it doesn't matter, but I mean, I just want to comment on, and yeah, we, like you said, Anik, we have had several stories on this or comments on this, and we've even had a guest on the show about this, and it really just comes down to, screening who you're selling to or who you're doing business with. And yes, to answer your question, even if you sell something to somebody and they turn around and sell it to somebody else, are you responsible for that? Unfortunately, you are. You need to know your customers. So, I mean, that's the way it is, And so I guess to answer your question, yes. And with regards to trade compliance, that's that's just something you need to deal with. And yeah, so I mean, the article talks about how the banks may be accidentally doing business and helping Russia, get those goods to Russia, when they're sanctioned. So, they're just warning on different ways or different things that they need to be aware of, just like all the exporters as well. So, but go ahead, Andy.
Well, I was going to say in this is that there are specifically the commodities are narrowing down to electronics and parts for aircraft, replacement parts for turbines, for example, and things of that nature for military aircraft and military vehicles on the ground. What are they trying to do? Well, Russia has obviously taken some, has suffered some damage in the war with the Ukraine. So as such, they're trying to get parts for their vehicles, their aircraft, their whatever, and their electronics. In the scenario, you did a good job there of saying it, Anik, is that people would sell to somebody in the U.S. to somebody in a country that maybe neighbors Russia, and then they in turn are sending it on to Russia or things of that nature. One of the things that came into play here is first off, the UK first raised this issue up, the Prime Minister from the UK as well. But the UK started looking at it, and they were monitoring from February to December of 2022. And of $1 billion worth of UK goods, most of it just disappeared, if you will, on its way to countries near Russia. And it wound up getting into Russia.
Attention all trade geeks. The G-Tech conference is coming to Oklahoma City and you won't want to miss it. Mark your calendars for July 30th through August 1st and join us for a jam-packed event with expert-less sessions and networking opportunities. And guess what? The Simply Trade podcast will be recording live at the event. Don't miss this unique chance to be featured on a show and share your insights with fellow trade professionals. We'll see you in Oklahoma City, where trade compliance takes center stage. Go to www.ncbfaa.org and become part of the action.
Unfortunately, you've got to know what your responsibilities are. So what are you doing with what I sell you? So if I'm a U.S. company and I have goods out there and you buy a Manic, I have to ask the question, what are you going to do with these goods? And if you turn around and are evasive with that, I'm better off to not sell you those goods.
Or a best practice would be that even if you think it's never going to end up in Russian hands or any sanctioned country's hands, if that product requires a license of some sort or something, just assume it's going to end up in Russian hands and do all that due diligence. You know what I mean? And just make sure that, okay, I'm going to pretend somebody is going to sell it to or eventually end up in Russia, for example, and just do what you need to do. Just assume that it is, and that'll be your best practice. Just err in the side of caution, I guess.
Okay, so the second one is also, I kind of connected with it because it kind of goes into sanctions once again, but this time it's a different country. So Sunak, the UK Prime Minister, I think, yes, he is the Prime Minister. China poses biggest threat to global security, and that is not my statement, that's his statement. But it says that he describes China as a much bigger global threat than Russia, which is crazy to hear. I think that's a huge statement, but that's why I kind of connect this article with the top one as well. So I'm just thinking, we're having sanctions against Russia, right? They're already there. They've been existing. So now what do we do? Put more sanctions on China, and then what will happen to the companies here that only do business with China and those sanctions come in? And this goes for any business that does international, transactions or whatever. What if the sanction is put to the country that they do business with? Do they have to shut down? Like, what do they do? Just find new ways? What do you do? And you don't know, that's not your fault. It's the other country's fault. But what's their possibilities? And I feel like that's a scare for a lot of companies right now.
If you are going to minimize your risk, and that's what the Prime Minister was talking about, rather than completely decoupling from them and completely stopping all trade with China, that's not what they're looking at. They're looking at trying to minimize the risk with China, which means you have to then look at finding other sources. And there you can use Malaysia, you can use India, you can use, South American countries and different. You have to step back and look at other sources. And that will in turn, just by the economics, will hopefully influence China to back off on some of their aggressiveness. Because if we talk about this, a global threat here as far as a security threat, remember in the U.S. a few years back, one of the things that was discovered, everybody loves the internet, obviously, and you love the scenario where you can get free Wi-Fi internet coverage, right? You could also have wireless internet coverage in office buildings and things of that nature. Well, Huawei was the company that was building and manufactured and shipped out these wireless routers. And what was discovered was that built into the wireless router any and all data that transmitted or that was moved through those wireless routers, the data then was sent back to China in the evenings. And they're like, nobody's here. What's going on? And it was emails, text messages, phone calls that were using this. All that kind of data was being recorded and sent back. That is espionage. And that's the scenario where you never, and literally the Huawei wireless routers had to be yanked out of the Pentagon and government offices. They nobody knew that until they finally discovered it. The point being is China's not playing fair. That's one thing. And the second thing is China's economy, being the second largest economy in the world, is not open to other countries' goods, especially U.S. or any other country. And the point being is they have full access to the U.S. market. Now we've been doing the China tariff, when Trump put them in and Biden's keeping in the 301 tariffs. But the point being is being a member of the World Trade Organization, WTO, to become a member of that as a country, you are to look at, and I've mentioned this before, but you should be looking at not only free trade, but fair trade, to where as you're doing that, you're supposed to be looking at reducing tariffs, hence the free trade scenario there. But I'm more of a fair trade guy. And it's more of, hey, if you're going to have access to the U.S. market, then you need to reciprocate and let us have access to your market. So that's where China can become more of a security threat, as they are taking our money as we buy the imported goods from China, and then turn around and they're bolstering their military. They're bolstering the information. They're doing strategic things where they're securing the raw goods for certain things. Case in point, we've talked about solar panels. Solar panels are built predominantly in China. Why? Because of the raw materials it takes. That is a global threat, because then they can just cut that stuff off and we're screwed if we have a dependence on it.
The next one is a different, we're getting a little bit into agriculture, as the U.S. Meat Export Federation says there are many questions still to be answered regarding Prop 12.
Proposition 12 is just a law that says if you're going to import meat, more specifically pork, into California, those pigs would have had to have been raised and, I guess, raised and 24 square feet, right, per sow. Yes.
Yeah, here's the thing. They're saying, well, it's inhumane. It's horrible the way they're being raised and whatever. And yet, here's one of the things. Keep in mind, it was when the law was passed, and it was recently upheld, that the state has the ability to pass that law, whether they like it or not. The U.S. Supreme Court did support, that the state has jurisdiction in that they can do that in their own state. They have actually cut the throat of the farmers there, or shall I say, I guess those that raise pigs in California. And in addition to that, the law continues on any foreign source goods. You have to raise your sows, if you will, to meet the California standards. I mean, in the meat industry, quite frankly, they look at it and it's going to be so ridiculous. What's going to happen is, and they say, well, likely it's not going to happen, where you'll have empty shelves where there's not going to be any more ham, bacon, any kind of pork, whatever. Guess what? People are going to stop doing business with California because of their laws and regulations cost too much to deal with it.
Oh, that's terrible.
Even though the U.S. upheld that, the U.S. Supreme Court upheld that, I'm looking and I'm thinking back of back in the mid 20-teens, like 2015, 2016, 2017. Remember, there was a law. The acronym was COOL, the Country of Origin Labeling Act of for meat that the U.S. had, and Mexico and U.S. won that with the WTO. in saying that it was unfair for unfair business practices and unfair for them importing their meat into the United States. So I'm thinking this may end up in the same way. I mean, because it is unfair. It really is unfair for other countries. Well, I mean, I would say even for the California farmers, even for them.
Anik, Penny, for your thoughts. What do you think of what we just went through and said here?
Oh, well, do you want my Gen Z answer? My Gen Z answer is that people are totally for it. They're going to say, this is what has to happen, and I hope it happens in the entire country. That's probably what they would want to say. Obviously, that is not the fact, because that would never happen.
On the surface, again, it sounds like, just like what we said before, it's like, oh, this is for, it's a green initiative. Everybody wants the green planet, and all that. Well, we talked about the carbon tax. But when you look at it, it's not fair on how it's being implemented when they look at it. In this particular case, this is an isolated event in California where they've put it together. And basically, the people in charge in California have passed this law, and they don't care what the economic impact is. They're going to be putting people out of work. They're going to be putting families that have raised, in this case, pigs. The next one's going to be steak. It's going to be your beef. But they're just starting with one there, and they're doing with the pork. California's law should not impact the rest of the 49 states. And that's where some of this importing, if you're importing from another country and all that, unfortunately, there's a lot of companies that are in other countries, along with U.S. domestic companies as well, that you've got to make a choice. If I want to continue doing business in California, am I going to adhere to their new state law requirements? Or am I going to look at it and go, you know what? That's just too expensive, or whatever the case may be, and I'm going to do, and I'm going to cut California out. And there's going to be companies that will step up and try and continue to do business, and there's other companies that are going to look at it and go, you know what, they can go pound sand.
This is a crazy topic. I expected this topic to be super boring, but it actually turned out to be very, very interesting. All right, well, I actually do have a fun fact. Okay, well, great talking about this last article. This was interesting, more interesting than I thought it was going to be, because everyone had great facts for me and something I definitely did not consider before. But I actually do have a fun fact for everyone, and I am sure that no one knows about this because, just kidding, you might, but probably not. Andy, let me know if you do, because I had already told Lalo and he didn't know. So let me tell you, Section 30 of the road traffic, and this is in Germany, so you really might not know, states that a truck over 7.5 tons or with a trailer is not allowed to drive on the entire route network in Germany on Sundays and public holidays. You're not allowed to drive your truck.
Well, you know why they're doing that, though, is the intent is that those are family days.
Well, yeah, but that's a truck. Like, I mean, how does that ruin your family day?
Not that, it's that you've got more families on the road. And so what they're striving to do is to minimize any, because a wreck there are a lot of people that will cut in front of a truck, or they'll try to get up and get in front of a truck and or hit their brakes, and that truck's heavy, and then it's trying to say, and so I think the intent behind that, I would be willing to bet you, is to minimize the number of accidents is one, and two,
and the
to minimize the traffic delays with a big truck in the way.
Yeah, but also economically, like emitting more, what is it? Do I want to say carbon dioxide?
Yeah, it's like those dudes. I love it. I love it. It's like whether you're driving on Sunday or any other day, what difference does that make? But all right.
I don't know, but that's what it is. And it's actually lovely, because I was on the road and someone said, oh, it's going to be so nice driving on Sunday because there won't be any trucks. And I'm like, why? And they're like, well, because it's a law here that they can't drive. And like, you're just like, what? Because coming from America, I mean, if you're on the road, you're going to see tons of trucks.
Yep.
But there is exceptions that, you know, if you have produce that are going to go bad like the next day or something, obviously those can drive, but those are very limited. So yeah, that's an interesting fact people might not have known.
So here's the impact. What do you think the impact is? That's great. The positive is you're driving, there's no trucks out there. What do you think the negative side of that is?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I feel like in the logistics world, that's not good because other
you lose a whole day of transit.
Yeah, and then other countries are probably not aware. So I feel like if you have a startup and let's say you're like, this is your first time doing business in Germany, you bring it there and you're like, well, it's going to get there Sunday night. And then the driver's like, no, it's not. Nope. So you have to know all that stuff. So how do you know all that stuff? That's crazy. You need to know all the rules.
Well, the service providers will understand it, but the issue is going to be more for consumers like yourself and others that go in and they go online to order their goods. And you're used to getting it in 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, whatever time frame that you're used to getting it. Guess what? You can just add another day into the cycle time there because it's going to delay your goods getting to you because the truck can't get across.
Yeah, but you know what? It'll get there eventually, and this is great. This probably was the most funnest episode, even though I didn't even think so in the beginning because I didn't really love the articles. But you know what? Got lots of knowledge. I
love our conversation. Just get good, bad, or different. We don't have to always agree, but I love the conversation.
Thank you guys for listening again. Like, subscribe, and follow us everywhere. We post our social posts on our LinkedIn, the Global Training Center one, and let us know what you want to hear next on the podcast or who you want to hear next. And we all want to wish you a happy Memorial Day, so go have some barbecue and enjoy your Sunday.
Simply Trade is not a law firm or an advisor. The topics and discussions conducted by Simply Trade hosts and guests should not be considered and is not intended to substitute legal advice. You should seek appropriate counsel for your own situations. These conversations and information are directed towards listeners in the United States for informational, educational, and entertainment purposes only and should not be substituted for legal advice. No listener or viewer of this podcast should act or refrain from acting on the basis of information on this podcast without first seeking legal advice from counsel. Information on this podcast may not be up to date depending on the time of publishing and the time of viewership. The content of this posting is provided as is. No representations are made that the content is error-free. The views expressed in or through this podcast are those of the individual speakers, not those of their respective employers or Global Training Center as a whole. All liability with respect to actions taken or not taken based on the contents of this podcast are hereby expressly disclaimed.